So let's stand up and welcome James Clear to the stage.
Let me tell you a story. So it's a story about a strategy, an approach, philosophy, one that I've been thinking a lot about. And it starts with a guy that maybe you haven't heard of. His name's Dave Brailsford. And to set the stage for this, I want to tell you a little bit about British cycling. So about 15 years ago, early 2000s, British cycling hires this guy named Dave Brailsford. And at that point, for the last 100 years, British cycling had been incredibly mediocre. They had won a single gold medal back in 1908. They had never won a Tour de France, which is the premium race in cycling, the premier race. And so they hired this guy named Dave Brailsford to change that. And in fact, at the time, they were so mediocre that when they went to buy a new set of bikes, they were going to get like 200 from a top manufacturer in Europe. They actually weren't even given quotes from the manufacturer because they didn't want other teams to see the British riders using their gear for fear that it would hurt sales. And so they brought Brailsford in, and they said, "What's your plan for changing this?" And he said, "Well, I believe in this philosophy that I call the aggregation of marginal gains." The way that he described it is the 1% improvement in nearly everything that you do. So they started with a bunch of things that you would expect a cycling team to start with. So for example, they put slightly lighter tires on the bike. They got a more ergonomic seat for the riders to sit on. They had their outdoor riders wear indoor racing suits because they were lighter and more aerodynamic. They had each rider wear a biofeedback sensor so they could see how they would respond to training and then adjust it appropriately for the person. But then they did a bunch of things you wouldn't expect a cycling team to do. So they split tested different types of massage gels to see which one led to the best type of muscle recovery. They taught each rider how to wash their hands to reduce the risk of infections so they wouldn't get a cold after, and get sick. They also figured out the type of pillow that led to the best night's sleep for each rider and then brought that on the road with them to hotels whenever they were competing. And Brailsford said, if we can actually do this, right, if we can execute on all these little 1% improvements, then I think we can win a Tour de France within 5 years. He ended up being wrong. They won it in 2 years, and then they repeated again the third year with a different rider. And then after a 1 year break, they won 2 more. So they've won 4 out of the last 5 now, have gone to British cyclists. But it was at the Olympics in London in 2012 when this kind of strategy really came to fruition. They won 70% of the gold medals available. And so this idea that small improvements, tiny habits, little choices are not just a cherry on top of our performance, not just like a nice thing to have, but actually can be the key that unlocks significant success. That's an idea that I want us to carry with us as we go through the rest of this presentation. And one way to think about it is just kind of basic math. Like if you just look at the numbers, if you were able to improve by 1% each day for an entire year, and those gains compound, you would end up 37 times better at the end of the year. And if you were to get 1% worse, you would whittle yourself almost all the way down to 0. And what's interesting here is that everybody wants a transformation, right? Everybody wants a radical improvement, we want rapid success. But we fail to realize that small habits and little choices are transforming us every day already. That these times when you make a choice that is slightly better, slightly worse, a little mistake or a small error, 1% better or 1% worse, that these things compound over time. And habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. And so if you can learn to master those, then you can make time work for you rather than get against you, right? Good habits make time your ally. Bad habits make time your enemy. And so throughout the rest of this presentation, I want to talk about how we can do that. Today, I'm going to teach you how to build the habits that you need to get the results that you want. And in order to do this, I'm going to take you through a framework for building better habits. And then I'm also going to share a personal example of how I used this. So my writing habit. If you don't know, I write at jamesclear.com. I write about how to build better habits, improve performance, and generally live better. Over 1 million people visit the site each month. There's over 400,000 subscribers on the weekly email newsletter. And it all came out of a simple writing habit. So for the rest of this talk, there are 4 stages of habit formation. I'm going to take you through each of those 4. All right, so the 4 stages are noticing, wanting, doing, and liking. Noticing, wanting, doing, and liking. You cannot perform a habit or take an action if you do not notice something. I need to see a coffee cup sitting on the side in order to pick it up first. If it's not in my realm of knowledge, if I don't know it exists, I can't do anything about it. But then I need to want it. I need to want to drink coffee and pick it up. If I don't desire it or crave it, then I will not take the action. Then there's doing. You actually do the habit. And then I need to enjoy the reward. I need to enjoy drinking the coffee to repeat it again. So noticing, wanting, doing, and liking. Let's talk about each one. And as we do this, I'm going to give you a little bit of research about why it works. I'm going to give you practical action steps, at least one for each, that you can use to implement it in your life. So one of my favorite things about noticing, one of my favorite strategies for discussing it, it's called implementation intentions. And there are hundreds of studies on this, over 100 studies on implementation intentions, if you feel like geeking out and getting into the research. But if not, I'll just give you the simple version here. So one of my favorite studies is about exercise. And they had 3 cohorts in this study. So they have first cohort, they said, I just want you to track how often you work out over the next few weeks, right? So that's the standard cohort, the control group. Second group, they said, we want you to track how often you exercise, but we're also going to give you a motivational speech presentation, talk about the benefits of heart health, why habits are good for you, and so on. So this is the motivated group, right? The third group, they got the same presentation, so they were equally motivated, and then they did one thing differently. And that one thing was they filled out this sentence. They said, during the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on this day, at this time, in this place, right? They specifically stated their intention to implement the behavior. So implementation intention. Here's what happened. First group, 1 out of 3 of them worked out. Second group, motivation did nothing. As soon as they left the researcher's facility the next day, they weren't motivated. It's like reading a book or watching a YouTube or listening to a motivational speaker, and then you forget all about it 20 minutes later. But the third group, the group that had a specific plan for how they were going to implement the behavior, 9 out of 10 of them worked out. So you can increase your odds of success 2 to 3x just by having a specific plan. And this is the insight. Many people think that they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. They think that they need to get more motivated, that they need willpower in order to execute on a habit. If I just felt like writing, if I just felt like meditating, if I felt like working out, then I would do it. But in fact, they don't have a plan for it, and so they wake up each day thinking, I wonder if I'll feel motivated to write today. I wonder if I'll feel motivated to work out today. But instead, you can take the decision-making out of it by explicitly stating when, where, and how you want to implement the habit. So here's how I did this with my writing habit. I decided that on November 12th, 2012, which was a Monday, if you check, that was going to be the first day that I published an article, and I was going to publish every Monday and every Thursday. That was my implementation intention. That was my specific plan. It didn't matter how good or how bad it was. It didn't matter how long or how short it was. It didn't matter how I felt about it. If all I could do was write 3 good sentences that day, then that was getting published. But I did that, and I did it for 3 years, and that was how the site grew. It was just that core habit that drove the growth. So you need to give your goals a time and a place to live in the world, right? Give them space on your calendar.